Okay. Nikki Hanson is a landscaping and wildlife management ecologist. Sounds like a mouthful, but it's backed by 20 years experience in research, growing native and native plants in the nursery industry, and doing habitat restoration. Her current work focuses on gardening and land management to create safer landscapes for fire resistance and protection while supporting our local birds and pollinators. And as she has written, any plant can burn given the right conditions. Nikki's lucky enough to be a multi-generational resident in La Honda, a graduate of UC Santa Cruz. And she works with her sister and her father in their business, California Sisters Landscapes, creating fire-safer landscapes in wildlands and urban gardens. Thank you, Nikki. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Judy. And thanks so much for reaching out and being interested in me talking to all of you. Also, side note, I'm definitely a plant nerd. I have been since I could walk, I think. And my mom is here and she can attest to that. So seeing all of you here tonight just gives me warm, fuzzy feelings for being my plant people. So yeah, thank you. Anyway, I will get right started because I want to have time for questions, and this is a really massive subject, and it's obviously not going to cover everything, and it's always evolving in what we know, but I'll do my best to give you a good overview. Let's see. Okay. So just this is kind of a map of where we're going in my in the flow of our talk, but just a few things to think about. How is fire resistant landscaping different than just landscaping or gardening? And here's kind of some of the areas. So one, strategize where to plant, but also think about where not to plant. Choosing the plants is important. As Judy quoted me, every single plant can burn given the right situations, but some are a lot more flammable than others. Break up continuous vegetation, so that's creating gaps and thinking about that. Next, intersperse non-flammable areas. So again, we're kind of thinking about sort of an equivalent to an art term. You're thinking about that negative space as well as where you're planting. We also think about space and gaps in the vertical sense, as well as space between your ground covers and your lowest tree limbs and that kind of thing, or horizontal space again. And then number 6 is super, super important, maintenance. So fire safety really just, in a nutshell, it comes down to also just a lot of maintenance. And the more maintenance, the more fire safe. So might seem obvious, but believe it or not always obvious. Irrigation is really important when we're trying to create our fire safe zone around our houses within our gardens. Okay. Just a quick acknowledgement that I want to just respect that there were and still are Native American people in California, and 13,000 years is a really long time to be living with fire. And before European influence came through and got rid of cultural burning and also did a lot more just massive changes in our landscape and a lot of more suppression of fires started through natural lightning strikes. California actually burned regularly, and we had a whole mosaic of mixed intensity fires, and that's partly why we have such a hugely diverse state. A lot of our native flora and ecosystems evolved with that. So just kind of thinking about fire, not all bad. Okay. In general, when we think about fire safety, I kind of want to take an overview step back. Really, if we're gonna kind of get the most bang for our buck, so to speak, and make our homes as fire safe as possible, it's super important to know where to start. And that is working from your actual structure outwards. I, yeah, I don't think am I doing little things up there?
No.
Okay, sorry, just checking, because sometimes I have weird effects on technology. I'm really a plant person, not a technology person. Okay, anyway, but yeah, so focus on the structure and then work your way out. Sometimes I see people get really distracted by their wider surroundings. And while that is valid to look at, don't get too carried away before we've looked at the home itself and that first 0 to 5 foot buffer. Okay. Sometimes the clicker.
Yeah, it's not working here either.
Okay, just a minute. Do you want to just?
Oh, there we go. See.
I feel like, did we miss a slide? No.
There we go.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so when you're looking at that structure in 0 to 5 foot spot, it's just thinking really hard about ember resistance. Typically with fires, you're not having a wall of flame come through, you're having embers that are coming out way ahead of the fire itself. Most structures, that's how they burn. So, I'm not going to really dig into home hardening, but I just want you to know that is a super important and pretty onerous part of the process, but important. Yeah, so this is just in a nutshell, a few things. Ember risky spots in zone 0. Zone 0 is our term for that 0 to 5 foot buffer surrounding the structure. And yeah, so this is a spot where sometimes we can kind of, from the perspective of standing in your house looking out, I don't know about you, but it's pretty easy for me to kind of forget what's right there. So I think it's better if you go out into your yard and look back at the house when you're trying to strategize your fire safety. And places to avoid planting altogether below windows or within those 5 feet. Mulch wisely. Keep mulch 5 feet away as well. When you do have mulch, remember, water it down really nice to flatten it. Less air pockets means less flammable. There's alternatives to wood chip mulch like gravel or even just soil and compost. Fences, railings, and gates near the structure, I'll talk about this some more, but those are super critical points where just time after time, what we've seen looking back and not analyzing what burned, what didn't, often it comes down to those connection points that led from beyond the structure and kind of gave that connection for the fire. So fire pathways. And even just putting a metal gate, like in this picture, that's my little house. That's, or nothing, you could have a gap. That's really handy. Outdoor furniture, along with that is just everything, like bins, recycling, wood, kindling. Like, there's a lot of stuff that can happen in that spot because it's useful, it's handy. Okay, so on to the fun part. Let's focus on where we can plant. Okay, just reminding us not to come from a place of fear. When we go into our fire safe gardening or fire safer gardening, I really want us to think about it from a place of dedication to careful, ongoing work, loving to create stuff that's beautiful and healthy, and kind of not lose that. Because sometimes when you get in that fear spot, you're not necessarily going to be making the most logical, calm kind of choices. Okay. So number 1, strategize where to plant and where not to plant. I have a couple photos here, just kind of giving that overview. These are gardens that I've done. Yeah, just kind of take a minute, look at, there are gaps in here. So it looks pretty, there's lots of plants. This absolutely passed Cal Fire inspection. This house sold for very recently. So yeah, that works. It doesn't look like a desert. It's actually filled in more since then. But still, Cal Fire likes it. They said it was great. Again, we're not to plant within 5 feet of the structure. Okay, I think this house is super pretty, but from a fire standpoint, not really looking so good. So if I was gonna go to this person and talk to them about where to focus on, I would say, okay, let's not try to do the entire perimeter of the house to start with, because that's a lot and totally overwhelming. Let's focus on below your windows or clearing around your entrances and exits, like making your evacuation pathways more fire safe. Also focus on, like, look around. Are there trees that are like super encroaching? You don't need to take the whole tree down most of the time. But, you know, pruning it, living it up, thinking about that. Okay, where can we plant? This is a bird's eye view from that same garden that I did. So yeah, I'm kind of looking down into the less attractive spot behind our elegant curtain steel screen. But I'm just trying to show you that even though there's definitely gaps and fire safe zones, there's also a lot of places where we can plant. So ground cover and low growing things, anywhere beyond the 5 foot zone of the structure. If you have your ground covers and you're maintaining them, that's great. It also is super useful for erosion control and keeping the soil shaded. So we want to think holistically, kind of like not throw the baby out with the bathwater when you're switching gears into your fire safe mindset, remembering all of your gardener and ecology and best management practices for creating a healthy system. And a plant that is healthy and has a lot of water within it and is not stressed, that plant is going to resist igniting a lot more than a plant that is really drought stressed. So yeah, healthy soil. It's good. Shrubs. Okay, with shrubs, I love shrubs. Shrubs get kind of a bad reputation in fire safety. And with a lot of fuel reduction work, I'll see pretty vast areas where all of the shrubs, every single one, is cut down to the absolute ground. Okay, you don't actually have to do that in your garden, but think about them strategically. So try to do clusters with gaps or specimens. You know, like, it's just trying to, you know, moderation. Okay. Trees. If you have tons of trees already, you probably aren't going to be adding, you probably shouldn't be adding in more trees. Maybe you're in the situation where you're going to have to make some hard choices and figure out where to thin. When you're doing that, there's definitely trees where you should look at, okay, what are my priorities for keeping? Not all trees are equally flammable or equally, you know, risky. If you have deciduous broadleaf trees like maples, those tend to be lower, you know, lower flammability risk. They're not as pitchy or sappy or resinous as, say, like a conifer or bay. Bay's quite flammable, unfortunately. Oaks. Oaks, actually, most of our oaks have evolved with fire, and I don't know how many of you have wood stoves or have tried going camping and tried to, if you try to, okay, I've grown up with wood stoves and heating our house with a wood stove. I very quickly, from a young age, learned you do not want to try to put a log on the fire if it has a big, thick oak bark on it. That's just going to smolder and smoke, and it's not going to be fun. So, oaks are designed to resist that fire. So when I'm looking at my landscape around my house with lots of little Douglas firs, and lots of healthy oaks. I'm always gonna say, sorry, little firs, you're going, but my oaks, I'm gonna strategize and keep you because having healthy, mature oaks is a real gift. Okay, large redwood trees. Those often can be pruned pretty nicely, but don't go overboard. Again, it's that sort of moderation. If you prune something so much that you've now taken away most of its foliage, it's going to be forced to push out a ton of new growth because all those leaves are the tree's solar panels. It's feeding this body, which is a massive tree. That's a lot to support. And I see this over and over where you can do it with any kind of tree too. Oaks as well, where you've over pruned and suddenly you're getting all of this new growth just pushing out. And it's because it's starving if it doesn't do that. So yeah, moderation. Think about where is that canopy shaping its own soil? How is that supporting the system in general to be more water, retaining more water? And also how am I gonna make maintenance manageable by not overdoing it and kind of setting myself up for more problems in the future. Okay. And like I said, this can happen with other trees. Just think about that. Maybe, okay, I know you already know this, but I definitely, my whole background and perspective is heavy on the ecology, thinking whole system. When we're creating, when I'm talking to people, when I'm working and installing and creating in the landscape, a few key phrases that I keep in my mind are we're creating islands of refuge, interrupted abundance. So that's not no abundance, that's not no beautiful overflowing areas. It's just interrupted, it's contained, there's gaps. I also really like to remember that we're trying, at least I'm trying to, create self-sustaining populations of little micro ecosystems. You're making these little micro habitats. It's partly what makes gardening so endlessly amazing and fun, because it's so complicated in a good way. Okay, so choosing the right plants. I'm not going to go into a ton about individual species, because that could be kind of an endless discussion. But I'm going to talk generally about some stuff. And my background is all native plants, but I do have an affection for a lot of Mediterranean plants. Okay, a few of the especially virtuous native plants that I think are valuable and worth retaining when we're selectively removing things. We have coffee berry. If you've ever felt a coffee berry leaf, it's one of our native shrubs. It's pretty common around here. A healthy coffee berry plant is naturally fire resistant, has a high water content in it. It's really well adapted to withstanding drought. Birds love the berries, and if you take a minute and you feel those leaves, try to bend the stem and the twigs, it's so flexible, it's leathery, soft. Yeah, so it's a really lovely plant. It's pretty low maintenance too. Assuming it doesn't have a disease and hasn't died or something. Dead plants burn better than live plants. Pink flowering currant. I love this one. It's all over. Great, handy, forgiving plant to have in your garden. Buckeye, oaks, maple. I feel like I need to move on so that we have time for questions, but I have lots of things to say about all of these things. Oops, didn't mean to go quite that fast. Okay. Keep in mind, when we're gardening, we're thinking about our whole system perspective. There's a few species that are kind of our keystone species, which we might not think about all the time. The base of our food chain, plants, we need plants. But then one step up from that, there's this multitude of insects and all kinds of tiny creatures that are so essential for everything from birds to, humans and our food crops and pollinators. We need our multitudes of healthy insect populations. for so many things. Okay, so that's why I'm talking here about coyote brush, 29 species of butterflies and moths, 55 species of pollinators, or more. This is from CalScape. It's a pretty fun website. Anyway, willow. Willow is a shocking one to me because we all think about oaks all the time and how important they are. Oak over here, 163 species of moths and butterflies. But willow, it's kind of inconspicuous. It can be a little shrubby, a little messy. It's doing a really amazing job of supporting our butterflies and moths. So don't just count it out. And we have a bunch of native willow species. Ceanothus. This is a very garden-worthy plant. There's a lot of selections. 95 species, butterflies and moths, that's a lot. And finally, Douglas fir. I definitely appreciate Douglas fir, even though I'm often thinning and clearing little ones. Sometimes you get, it's doing a really good job too. And if you're as lucky to have a healthy, enormous Douglas fir, it's worth bringing it tastefully, thinking about how to work it into the landscape and keep it. It's doing an incredible job. Okay, couple things to remove. These ones are definitely hot. Removable plants. Okay, bamboo, eucalyptus, palms, and acacia, jubata or pampas grass over here, and juniper. All of these are really flammable. A couple of these are really just, this is a giant grass. Stems are all hollow. It gets really messy. It grows really fast. So just the nature of it means that it's flammable. It's also tall, so it's really hard to keep it low. Not all species of bamboo, but a lot of them. Palms, they don't have any true wood on them. So that's kind of interesting. They're really flammable because they're pretty messy. Again, they're hard to keep up with on your maintenance. Acacia, just, this is great for firewood though. Stuff burns so hot. It's amazing. But my dad and I also were thinking as our fire was cranking, we're like, this explains that whole like, watch out for acacia thing. Anyway, eucalyptus, we probably are all really familiar with that one being kind of on the no list, and we're watching fuel reductions everywhere really hit that one pretty hard. Something that you might not know about though, that's kind of affecting the flammability of the surrounding landscape is how much water a lot of the eucalyptus that were planted around here. There's a big diversity in Australia of different species of eucalyptus, but the ones that we often see here are not necessarily the most drought tolerant. They're just really good competitors. They're excellent at sucking up water. They do that so successfully that they're often stealing water away from the more water conserving native plants. So it's kind of having this double impact of the plant, the eucalyptus itself is highly flammable and it's problematic because it's tall, it's overtopping our native trees like oaks. If it does catch fire in a fire, its leaves have enough substance and oil to them that they can actually sustain being carried, half a mile out ahead of the fire kind of thing, or a mile out even if the winds are super high. Like, it's kind of problematic. So for a lot of ways, but yeah, think about the water issue too. Juniper is just very renowned in a way. It's a bit of an infamous one if you're a firefighter, just because it's so fast to take off. And then this one, invasive, problematic, but also just really flammable. It's a giant grass. While you're at it, remove these ones too, please. These ones are bad from just different ecological perspectives. Yeah, I'll come back to those if we have time. Okay, things to think about when you're choosing plants. Basically, I'm just giving a whole bunch of questions here. But I figure if you start thinking about this in the right way and asking the right questions, you'll eventually get to the right answer. So Yeah, kind of teaching you how to fish versus giving you the fish maybe. But yeah, think about when you're planning your yard, we're dipping it up into our microclimates. Every single yard has microclimates. If you have a structure, you're gonna have some kind of north side and south side. Like you could be living on a perfectly flat lot and you would still have variation in the soil, or wind. So just think about, these are all questions that you should think about when you're trying to be a detective and figure out your microclimates. Number 3, break up continuity. So these are creating our fuel gaps, a varied garden, as well as a varied landscape or an ecosystem on a larger scale. What we know is that it makes it harder for fire to travel. It also does another thing. It makes our system a lot more resilient. And like I said before, a live healthy plant is gonna burn slower than a struggling plant, or a diseased plant or a dead plant. So yeah, it's a good thing. Having diversity is really handy for keeping disease down. It's harder to spread plant to plant to plant. Pests, it's harder to sustain large populations. Having that diversity means maybe one year something gets hit really hard with aphids or whatever, but it doesn't get everything because you don't have a monoculture. And then, yeah, a patchy or landscape is good from a fire perspective as well. And drought and weather and cold, it's all having that variation. It's like having your backup plan and your backup to the backup plan. Okay, another concept that I've mentioned before, but I really do believe in this. Create your islands of abundance. We're not going for uniform sparsity. Because if you're here, you love gardening as much as I do, we love abundance. We want diversity. We want to learn and plant, grow, and see things thrive. So really, we should still be doing that. In fact, a lot of little creatures all around us absolutely depend on us, not just getting rid of those diverse, abundant gardens. But do have your gaps. This is another garden I did. That's up in, it's up above Los Gatos. Yeah, on the west side of Sky. This gets a lot of wind, but all these plants are doing really well. Okay, breaking up continuous vegetation. This is my driveway. So on one side, I have my asphalt driveway. It's a good fire break. On the uphill side, I really weed whacked down that hill. Yeah, I definitely don't need to go to the gym. I'm doing a good job. Garden, just go outside. It's actually a lot steeper than it is too. I swear it is. Anyway, but yeah, so I've broken up my continuity. Also, you can see here, there's a gap between the trees and my garden zone. So I'm creating this patch of abundance. It's shading the soil. It's keeping itself going. I also have some interspersed longer lived things. So as well as all the fun animals, there's shrubs selectively there to keep that stability going. Include housing for your helpers. These little guys, don't know if you can see them. This is baby swallows. This is its little beak, its little eye. Okay, I love these. These are my neighbors. These swallows, their family come every year, and I'm really grateful for them nesting under my eaves. I have super tall eaves. I actually looked it up and I asked for people because when I heard about soffitted eaves, where you're supposed to box in your eaves for hardening so that those, it's not exposed, that would be a disaster for my little friends here. But mine are so high. I said, you know what? It's more related to the lower. Anyway, these are doing an amazing job. I used to have a horrible problem with yellow jackets and wasps and horseflies. I have none, zero. Okay, so totally worth it. Don't worry about the poop.
Fertilizer.
Yeah, correct. And so, yeah, this is a little new face. So adorable. If you are lucky enough that you for some reason have a super old growth chunk of redwood in your yard, keep it. That's a gem. And as it decomposes slowly over time, look, I here. Anyway, but yeah, I actually am serious. You want to provide that diversity of habitats. It helps you out, like these guys eating insects that are
Hey,
annoying
Nate,
or
brilliant.
eating your plants. Okay. Keep moving. Okay, these birds need decomposing dead stumps or partially decaying dead trees or dead branches. Essentially, they need a not perfect environment. They need a little bit of funkiness, a little bit of mess, because all of these beaks are super tiny, but they're cavity nesting birds. They can't actually drill their own little cavities. Some of them, like chickadee, and this little wren, I think that's a little house wren, they probably could make use of a bird box, but I don't know, I'm not sure how many people have seen little ground creeper. That's literally its name, ground creeper. I don't know if they use bird boxes. Not all birds use bird boxes. So yes, just the other day, I watched a chickadee at my grandmother's house and I couldn't figure out what it was doing. And then I realized it was making use of a cut on an oak tree and a limb that had been pruned because it was encroaching on the eaves of the house. But the limb hadn't healed quite right, so there was a little gap. And this chickadee was going in and out and in and it's like, is it getting food? Is it getting worms? I just sat and watched it and I realized it was actually just cleaning out the soft, punky parts of the tree and making its nest. And its partner was bringing it, fluffy, nice things to line it with. But yeah, so I was like, right there in front of me as I'm, process of putting this together. It's a real life example. Anyway, all of these are very good. Newts, lizards, salamanders. I didn't put a picture of a snake because not all of us like them. Also didn't put a picture of a spider, but I did put a picture of a turret spider's house because they're pretty cool. They actually close, they have a little line of silk and they can kind of cinch in the opening right there. So clever. Yeah, we have some really, really miniature, adorable snakes in our area, like shark tails and ring-necked snake and rubber boa. And yeah, we're really fortunate. These birds need low dense cover. So another reason to not just go too far afield when we're getting rid of shrubs. Because if you like birds, a lot of us do, and even if you don't like them, you can appreciate them and why they're important in the whole system. Yeah, these guys don't actually, they don't nest in the tall canopy part. So if all that's left is a very tall canopy, removed a big chunk of the housing. Okay, interspersed non-flammable areas. I think this is about a year after I installed that garden. So this is one of the gardens I did. It's in a very, very high risk area. Weirdly, I don't think you can see it in this picture. It's really funny though. It's kind of an example of that. We're working and doing all this work further afield, and then there's still wood lattice that went around their house. And I kept being like, I hate to be a pain, but because I'm not a home hardening person and you're not hiring me for that. But I would be remiss if I didn't point out we're doing this beautiful work. kindling like under your deck. Anyway, so yeah, those little details, they really matter. But yeah, I really like how then everything kind of overflowed and filled in. It was really pretty. Oh, they really, really liked their shed. So we coated the entire outside with corten steel, corrugated. And we even like, my dad was really amazing on this. He hung in there with me, but it was such a big pain in the butt because there was no, there was no straight lines on that shed. It was a really sentimental, special shed. That was why we did it. But yeah, anyway, interesting things. But they really stayed true to the fire safety. It was impressive. Paths, super handy, mini fuel breaks. I never use, I tend to either use rock or metal. I do not use fender board. So it's like, I guess one of the main things that would be different. And then also, instead of using, I don't know, you could have paper, compost or something, instead of like a mulch. Sometimes people, like in my kids' school garden, they use big swaths of mulch. If you're doing a fire safe garden, you might want to think about that part, unless it's composting mulch. We'll get into that later. This is that gap that's super important. So again, sometimes I see immaculate fuel reduction all the way around the house on the property. I drive up and down Old Hunter Road quite often. And I've seen this huge change in the last few years with all the fire safety work, which overall is good, and I totally appreciate it. I was evacuated from CCU for over 2 weeks when it came through, because it was less than a mile from my house, and I literally thought I was gonna lose everything. But 100%, I love living out there in the woods, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But interesting fact. So I see all the fuel reduction, and then surrounding it is just a like ground to 6 feet tall wood fence. Just do the whole thing. I was like, and it's for privacy because they removed all the shrubs and now you can see in. So you want privacy, and I get it. I'm like, gosh, arguably tinder dry vertical planks of thin, very well seasoned kindling. It's just more flammable. Like it just from a logical perspective of somebody who started countless fires in the fireplace and like tried to put green, like semi-green wood on there. It's just like, anyway, kind of that's just that perspective thing. And if you're not going to replace your whole fence, even just having those strategic gaps makes a big difference. So maybe you have a huge long privacy fence, but just kind of thinking, how could I, maybe put a panel up that's metal, or maybe the support is metal and the in between is wood, just like some kind of break in that fuel pathway. Attractive fuel cap around the wood deck. Okay, so not all fuel breaks need to be, austere. This one we tried to emulate. This is like very upper Portola Valley. So this one they were trying to emulate creek bed. And it looks really pretty. Sometimes in the spring you get a little bit of annual wildflowers coming in, but they're pretty temporary. More examples. These are just like your, build in your fuel grabs. This one, so this is really, really different. I work with all different clients. Sometimes they're like this level of we're doing the whole thing, kind of, big budget. This was a family that's living way out in the redwoods. And so we were doing a much smaller scale. But you can still do a good job, you know? Both of these are serving the same purpose. Oops. Oh yeah, so creating our vertical and horizontal space, we've kind of already been touching on that. But again, yeah, I guess my point is, you don't need to lose the graceful, enjoyable, aesthetically pleasing. And also this cherry tree, it's super ancient, or not ancient, but it's a really old, really beautiful cherry tree. So I very carefully pruned it, but in a way that wouldn't lose its personality. And yeah, it's actually not next to the structure, so that's totally fine. And in general, even on Cal Fair, when you're looking at suggestions, or not suggestions, but like, you know, fuel reduction guidelines, they'll say conifers and pines, you have to go a bit farther off the ground. And that's because they're more pitchy, more flammable, than say a broadleaf tree. Here is more samples. This is a note on defensible space. This is an excerpt from a guideline I created because a lot of the people I work with don't know what to do when you're trying to do fuel reduction and your house doesn't look like the picture that Cal Fair's given you, because we don't live on golf courses. And so it's kind of a problem. You're like, gosh, I giant redwood forest storms around. So I was like, you're right. And I've even talked face to face with a bunch of different people from Cal Fire, and I've done training with the defensible space stuff. And they admit, they're like, yeah, that's a general thing. That's trying to give us the right idea. It doesn't mean that that's literally what we're doing. We acknowledge that you cannot take your house that's in the middle of a redwood forest and clear like all these trees. Like, that's not feasible. It's actually not even a great thing. So this is just a kind of a example of your goal. So maybe you have a fuel reduction around your, maybe you're working in that kind of 30-foot zone and you live near adjacent to chaparral. If you have a diverse native chaparral population of plants, that's really cool. Don't go to this. It would be fast. You could hire a masticator and they could, you know, if it's not too crazy steep, if you have a remote control masticator on tracks, yeah, you could just go, just fast. It's clear. But the next season it rains, it is not gonna spring back to that. Maybe if you live in a place where it's surrounded by pristine native habitat and there are no weeds, yeah, it would go back to that. But that's just not our reality. We're mostly surrounded by roadsides, or the equipment itself came in and it has seeds stuck in the tracks. Even if you clean it really well, it's kind of impossible ask to perfectly well clean a tractor. And especially if you have jobs, you're going site to site, you have to get it done. You wouldn't be able to take apart everything and clean it perfectly. So just in reality, it's gonna introduce something. So the point of going from here to here is that you are carefully leaving that soil layer intact. So you are minimizing the disturbed areas where your invasive stuff's gonna suddenly have this opportunity to jump in and grow way faster and fill in quicker than all of your native shrubs that are actually less flammable than a whole bunch of our weedy invasive plants that are really happy to get a little foothold. Here's another example. And this is definitely, if we're thinking, I know a lot of us might just have gardens, so forgive me if this doesn't apply to your exact space, but I feel like it's still really interesting because we're seeing it more and more as we drive around, drive through the hills. Um, if you're advocating for fuel reduction in the broader landscape, we're thinking, you know, we're doing an extra good job. We're going beyond the 100-foot zone that CAL FIRE talks about. We really don't, like, it's not in anyone's benefit to go from here to a very simple formula or prescription. Say you have a prescription that's like, okay, we're gonna limit up absolutely everything to, you know, 6 feet, no matter what size of the plant. And then we're gonna remove all the shrubs down to the soil. No, that doesn't actually work long-term because you've created a drought stress system. You've also gotten rid of the cover for a whole bunch of your healthy soil supporters, your mycorrhiza, which are the beneficial and enormously important fungal network that helps so many of our plants actually be more drought tolerant. Because mycorrhiza have these filaments that are hair-like, and they have such an enormously bigger surface area than a plant's roots. That's why the mycorrhiza are so critical to helping our plants survive long droughts. And so, yeah, if you got rid of all of that, that's exactly where your mycorrhiza need to have some cover. And maintenance. We're getting close, guys. 8.6. We can do it. Oh, okay. Maintenance, basically like cleaning your kitchen, it never ends. But if you like gardening, that's okay. Plus, you don't have to go to the gym, just keep busy in the garden. Anyway, yeah, so leaves, especially from under decks, 5 feet, paths, hardscape, long fences. Cutting things back, so much pruning. I really love pruning, luckily. Although I really need to start becoming more ambidextrous. I can definitely feel my right hand is not like that. I love pruning so much. But yeah, so this goes a long way because when you're doing your good pruning and your good garden maintenance, if you're doing what the plant needs, which, oops, in this case, this is a salvia, it likes that. That keeps it going longer. That gives it a longer life. It's more beautiful. It flowers more. It's also more FireSafe. So, this is one of the gardens I came in. This is nearby. It's Woodland Library Garden. So I was helping Glenda with reviving that garden because it had been very, it just needed some resuscitation. So a few years back, we went in there and there was a backlog of pruning, and that was really fun. Anyway, but yeah, timing on maintenance is really important. I don't have, speaking of time, I don't have time to go into all the timing. But in general, late fall and early summer are good times to mow. But it kind of varies system to system. It's really hard to give a general form. But yeah, pay attention to timing, ask questions, do some research. This is some mycorrhiza. This is the forest, the redwood forest near my house. We had a mulch pile sitting there for a couple months, 6 months. Anyway, I dug into it. It was beautifully composting, like absolutely gorgeous. And glistening and sparkling filaments of mycorrhiza just lacing through the whole thing. You could literally see it. So you didn't have to just read about it and picture it, you could see it. It was so cool. And with mulch, again, not all mulch is equal. If you have partially decomposing wood chip mulch, that's pretty darn good. And there's science and research to back it up where they've done burn tests on it. Even if it's not composted yet, make sure it's actually, this is gonna sound funny, but if you have it too thin, then it's actually gonna kind of prevent it from decomposing and breaking down. So So aiming for that 3 inches, which is allowed, 3 inches of mulch, and then really deeply watering it in so it really flattens and gets a good soil contact, that's gonna get your mulch a good amount more fire safe. And it's gonna help everything else along the way. Also less eating, so less. See, it's all. Okay, irrigation. To quote Los Politos Nursery's founder, who I wish I could have met that guy. I love his writing. If you guys haven't already, go to Los Politos Nursery website. They still have so much of his writing on all kinds of topics. But he was saying, build in your watering schedule, know what your plants need, do it. Because watering everything right before when the fire's coming, he's like, that's not gonna cut it. It's like, keep your plants alive. And a lot of native plants actually don't take nearly as much. So, or Mediterranean, South African, you know, you can kind of get strategic. Many things, including mycorrhizal, like overhead water. It also keeps the foliage dust free, which is a benefit from a fire perspective. It also cleans off all of those little solar panels, aka eaves. So it's doing good stuff. It helps the plants breathe better too. Which plants like drip? Plants that don't mind isolated inundation or slow drainage. So often your most drought or dry adapted plants are going to be the ones that least prefer drip irrigation. So a lot of times I'll see this sort of conflicting situation where people are doing a really good job saving water by having the drip irrigation. But at the same time, that's kind of the worst thing you could do for, say, your manzanita that you just put in, because it's getting that inundation right in one place, which is just really, that's not what it likes. We're not going to watch this, obviously, but this is from a nursery down in Southern California. It's a super, super good video on how to water. As somebody who worked in a nursery for at least 17 years, and I was training all kinds of nursery systems, and I was the person that was onboarding new people, tiers, and making how-to manuals, you would not believe how hard it is to teach people how to water. There's a whole art of watering, and I'm sure you guys would believe me, because if you grow plants, you know watering is not as simple as it sounds. This guy does such a good job explaining stuff. I wish I had that video the whole time. And then again, close to the structure. Sometimes you can take a lot of good designing tips from nature, like water pipes, tasteful pruning. This is a house down in Redwood City. I took a photo because I thought it was so spectacular. And it also, oops, sorry, we're basically done. But it also showed how, I really liked how it showed that they didn't try, okay, this picture, it's hard to see how massive this tree is. This one, you really can. This branch is the size of a normal giant oak tree. And they were really smart, or their arborist or their pruning company they hired was really smart and did not try to just remove the whole thing. Just thought it, throw it in there. And yes, it's Redwood City, so it's not like, you know, up in the hot, but I would say the same. Yeah. Beyond this, it's just extra stuff I threw at the end. Okay, that's it for me.